When I sharply snapped back, Rose scowled at me and shouted, "Stop leeching off Dad." Her voice was filled with anger and frustration. I made up my mind. Oh, it's no use. I gave up in my heart. My feelings for Rose did not reach her. The emotional bond one was trying to establish with Rose was severed. Rose needs to reflect on her actions. She must face the consequences of her actions, and I will tell her the truth. My name is Jasmine, and I am 50 years old. I have been married to Luca for 5 years. Both Luca and I had been married before we met each other. I divorced my previous husband because he had an affair. One day, when I came home, I found divorce papers from the lawyer in the post. Since then, my ex-husband never returned. I didn't even know where he was, but I submitted the response to the court. Since then, I haven't seen or even heard from him. We used to argue a lot and weren't very close, so I had expected this to happen someday, but it was so sudden that I couldn't eat and was very depressed at the time. I couldn't just sit around, so I threw myself into my work. I filled the void in my personal life with work. I worked frantically. After work, I frantically studied marketing and management. Thanks to that, I didn't even think about remarriage or dating, and before I knew it, I was 40. My family runs a small diner. It's a cozy place that serves set meals during the day. The food is good, plentiful, and affordable, making it popular with the townsfolk. It's a small town, but almost everyone must have eaten our food at least once. In particular, my father's chicken steak is the restaurant's specialty. When Luca proposed to me, I was over the moon, but hearing that he had a daughter made me anxious about the future. Will this work out? The thought of suddenly becoming the mother of an adult daughter was crushing my buoyant feelings, leaving me completely deflated. Now my heart feels heavy and dark. That's when I got a text from Luca, "No rush on your response." I meant every word I said earlier. His unhurried reply calmed my turbulent heart as if the tide was receding. Yes, Luca is serious and kind. He would surely support me through anything. As for his daughter, Rose, though she's a concern, she's an adult. She won't throw a tantrum like a child. She will understand about Luca and me. I decided to accept Luca's proposal. When I told Luca I would accept his proposal, he was overjoyed. Seeing Luca express his happiness so openly, I felt truly glad to have chosen to be with him. Since we were both remarrying, we just had a small dinner to introduce each other to our families. But Rose was in the worst mood she had ever been in. She was irritable and took out her feelings on the staff. Ugh, so annoying. Come on, bring the next dish. Rose, calm down. Shut up. Don't you order me around, old lady. The term old lady took my breath away. I had met Rose a few times before, but this was the first time things had turned out this way. Is this Rose's true nature? After the introduction party, I wondered if she might be harboring dissatisfaction with Lucas and my marriage. After the introduction party, I discussed Rose's behavior that day with Luca. Perhaps we should consider postponing the marriage. Wouldn't it be better if Rose sorted out her feelings first? To my words, Luca shook his head. Indeed, Rose's attitude today was problematic, but she has already moved out of the house, and we won't be seeing her every day, right? Being tied down by an independent daughter forever doesn't seem right to me. Indeed, since Rose had already moved out, it wouldn't be like we'd see her every day. Lucas suggested that being confined for so long during today's introduction party might have irritated Rose. Normally, Rose is quiet and not the kind to get angry like that. Please give Rose a chance, she's really a good kid at heart. Encouraged by Luca's words, I decided to proceed with the marriage. At this moment, I was determined to marry Luca and live my life with him. Yet, every time I saw Rose, I was reminded of that incident, which only increased my anxiety. With these worries, I started living with Luca. We bought an apartment located halfway between my company and Luca's. Rose was living alone in an apartment near her company, so it was just Luca and me living together. The first 2 years passed without incident, and we had a happy time. The only tough part was during the holiday season when we met Rose, but other than that, it was peaceful. However, in the 3rd year of our marriage, we faced a significant problem. Rose moved in with us. Apparently, the apartment where Rose lived was undergoing major renovations. Because of the noise and the comings and goings of the workers, it's unsettling, so I'm moving, Rose said, and moved in with us. I had a bad feeling about it, and that feeling turned out to be right. We turned a room we used as a storeroom into Rose's room. Rose complained about it being cramped and poorly lit, yet we somehow managed to convince her to tolerate it. For the moving-in celebration, we decided to have pizza. When I was about to order our usual delivery, Rose went ahead and placed an order from a famous steakhouse. The dishes from there are indeed delicious, but it's also quite expensive. It would cost about 5 times more than the food we usually eat. I was about to refuse, but Luca gave me a look. I've recently realized that Luca is lenient with Rose. He tends to give in to Rose's whims. Perhaps that's why Rose gets upset easily when things don't go her way, and she generally has an attitude. It seems like she thinks of the staff in any store as her servants. I've never seen Rose use words like, "excuse me," or "thank you," to the staff, not just to the staff but to me as well. Living with Rose was like that. I was feeling down, but this was too much to worry about from the start. In the end, we ordered the food as Rose wanted. When the dishes arrived, Rose said, "It's late." Our order was supposed to have been refused at first due to the sudden order, but Rose insisted and made them deliver, and she complained that they were late. I apologized profusely to the delivery person while receiving the dishes. The payment, of course, came from our wallet. As I checked the contents of the 3 delivery boxes, I found 2 assortments of appetizers and steaks and 1 box of hot dogs. While I was puzzled, I laid out the food on the table. As I began preparing drinks and soup, Rose and Luca took their seats. Rose poured beer for Luca, raised her glass with his cheers, and began to drink. To Rose, I must be nothing more than a servant or a maid. Luca doesn't admonish Rose, "Is there something going on?" When I sat down at the dining table, in front of me was the box of hot dogs. I let out a soft, and Rose looked at me with a smug half-smile. "That should be enough for you," she said with a snort and began eating the appetizers. I had some vegetable sticks while Rose enjoyed the shrimp cocktail, fresh salad, and chicken wings. It was a clear act of spite from Rose towards me. I thought this would surely anger Luca, but all he did was sigh as he looked at Rose. Luca offered his box of appetizers to me. "Have some of this," he said. I nodded slightly and took some portions from Luca. I was tempted to scold Rose but restrained myself, considering that a confrontation on the first day might complicate our future cohabitation. Moreover, I felt disadvantaged as if I had usurped Luca from Rose. Thus, living with Rose began in the worst possible way. Luca doesn't talk much about Rose. Whenever I ask about her, he just says, "She's at a difficult age. Please forgive her." While working, helping out at my parents' house, studying, and doing household chores, I was already swamped. Now I had to take care of Rose on top of everything. Rose is simply selfish. She does nothing around the house. It's hard to believe she lived alone before. Moreover, Rose's requests are incredibly bothersome. Even a single piece of clothing came with a litany of instructions, which items required dry cleaning, which should be hand-washed, and which needed air drying. When it comes to food, she specifies supermarkets and even the origin of the products. I usually plan meals based on sales and featured items at the supermarket, but that's not possible when accommodating Rose's preferences. I found myself planning meals while also checking recipes on the internet. As a result, our household expenses have nearly doubled. Rose doesn't contribute financially to the household at all. Even when I talk to Luca about it, he just says, "Please bear with it." Unwilling to stir up unnecessary conflict, I chose to tolerate the situation. I reluctantly decided to cut back on work. I was valued and had high expectations at my company. There were even hints of a possible executive position in the future, but now family comes first. I applied for reduced working hours at the company. This decision will likely close the door on any career advancement, but I do it for Luca and Rose. I've decided to endure. While I was shopping for dinner at the supermarket after work, I received a call from my mother. The call was to inform me that my father had been hospitalized. What? Dad's in the hospital. After hanging up the phone, I hurried to the hospital. Our family home is relatively close by, so I arrived in about an hour. In the hospital room, my father was watching a baseball broadcast on TV with earphones in. Noticing me, he took out his earphones and smiled at me. Mom just exaggerated over the phone. Ha! Relieved, my legs gave way, and I slumped to the floor. My back's been hurting, my father explained. It seems years of standing work had taken a toll on his back. I've decided to go through with the surgery, he told me with a laugh. At that moment of relief, I remembered something important. I hadn't informed Luca or Rose about any of this. I pulled out my cell phone from my shopping bag. There were countless missed calls from Rose. I regretted being late, my heart was pounding. I hurriedly called Rose back. Rose's voice sounded displeased. "Where are you and what are you doing? Hurry back and make my dinner." I apologized reflexively. "I'm sorry, my dad's been hospitalized." Rose was silent for a moment but then started scolding me sharply. Your dad. Your dad really?" Rose's tone became vulgar and aggressive. I felt intimidated and shrank back. I replied in a small voice, "Yes, he was suddenly hospitalized." "And what does that have to do with my dinner?" Rose's reasoning was becoming absurd. "You're my mother, right? Understand, it's a parent's job to make meals for their child." It might be understandable if Rose were still in elementary or middle school, but Rose is 26 and has lived alone before. She's fully an adult. For such an adult to demand meals from a parent is beyond harassment. I felt compelled to stand up for myself. I'm not good with Rose's assertive tone or harsh words. Although I was scared of being yelled at, I decided to confront Rose. "Is it wrong to worry about my dad? You should understand." I could hear Rose gasp over the phone. "Shut up. Don't talk back to me." I must have hit a nerve. Rose seemed taken aback. "If it were your dad, you'd rush to his side, wouldn't you?" Rose fell silent. Perhaps she was imagining if it were Luca who had been suddenly hospitalized. Surely Rose would be worried if something happened to Luca. That's what I thought. However, Rose's response was beyond my expectations. I'd ignore it if my dad was hospitalized. I was speechless. I wanted to believe it was a lie. I was speechless. Anyway, I said, "Sorry, but you'll need to eat out today," and hung up. This call made one thing clear to me: Rose doesn't see me as her mother at all. In fact, she doesn't even see me as a person. She must think of me as a mechanical servant or a slave, otherwise, she couldn't say such heartless things. It's saddening, but I can't just dwell on sadness. Things can't go on like this. I felt a strong need to take action. Even after my father is discharged, he won't be able to work as before. There's only so much my mother can help with. I need to address the situation at my family's home quickly. Balancing my family's needs, taking care of Rose, household chores, and work was impossible. I decided to resign from my job. Though the company tried hard to retain me, there was no other way. Just as my father was discharged and we managed to reopen our shop, something happened to Luca. Luca ended up being hospitalized. Moreover, his condition was quite severe. Dr. Jason, the chief physician, said he might never be discharged. When I informed Rose of Luca's condition, she reacted nonchalantly and said something unbelievable. "Does this mean it's going to cost a lot of money?" Rose seemed more concerned about money than Luca's health. What could this mean? I couldn't understand her reasoning. Does Rose not care about Luca at all? This is not the time to worry about money. Do you understand? I became emotional and retorted. I know that, but if we don't have money, we'll be in trouble, won't we? Rose pulled out her cell phone and started making a call. Hello, Uncle Max. Actually, Dad is sick and has been hospitalized. It seemed Rose was calling Luca's brother. She was speaking in an uncomfortably sweet tone. So, I was hoping you could help with the hospital bills. Rose was scheming on the phone, trying to get her uncle to pay for the hospital bills. Then you can ask Mom about the rest. After ending the call, Rose gave me a cold smile. I felt a chill down my spine from that smile. So, you'll have to talk things over with Uncle Max. Humming a tune, Rose went back to her room. I was still reeling from Luca's hospitalization when Rose's actions left me stunned. After a while, I received a call from my brother-in-law. I explained Luca's condition and the outlook for the future. I broke down crying midway, but I managed to explain everything. I also assured him that I would take care of the hospital bills, so he shouldn't worry. After hanging up, I slapped my cheeks with both hands to psych myself up. I can't afford to mope around over this. But bad things continued to happen. After our marriage, Luca was entrusted with managing his parents' company. However, the business began to struggle. The cost of raw materials had been rising for years, leading to higher purchase prices and reduced profits. The company was so strapped that it couldn't afford to pay employees' salaries. In the past, Luca's family used to help my family's business, but now the roles were reversed, and my family was supporting Luca's company. With the business in trouble, Luca had cut his own salary. So, I was paying for the hospital bills with my salary. Most of the insurance policies list the company as the beneficiary. Ironically, Luca's insurance money gave the company a bit of a breather during these hard times. In such a difficult time, Rose lashed out at me. The reason was a photo on my phone of a dining scene at a restaurant. Don't mess around using other people's money for such luxury. Rose berated me with vulgar language and an aggressive tone. The photo was from a time I was asked to sample dishes at a restaurant I visited for work. A client took the photo and sent it to me, but unfortunately, it backfired. You're using our money for stuff like this. Rose's words made me realize something. It seems she's under the impression that I'm living off Luca's money. The reality is quite the opposite. Currently, I'm the one providing for most of our household expenses. I've repaid all the money I borrowed from Luca in the past with interest. Rose's anger didn't subside. It seemed futile to say anything at the moment. Rose's command, "Get out," compelled me to leave the house. I left a single piece of paper on the dining table. I chose to spend the night at a hotel. It would be useless to explain anything to Rose. No, if I tried to explain, she might start depending on my money. I wanted to avoid that. I resolved to stick to the plan and take appropriate action. I made a promise to myself. I went to visit Luca's hospital room. I visit every day, but today felt special. Rose didn't come today either. Huh, Luca gave me a sad smile. His smile always reassured me. I'm sorry for being so inadequate, I said. Luca shook his head. It's not that. It's my fault. Rose turned out this way because of me. Luca began to share something he hadn't told me about Rose before. Rose is not Luca's biological child. His ex-wife had an affair, and Rose was the result. Luca found out just before his ex-wife passed away. Hearing this, Luca felt an indescribable anger. The person most at fault was lying in bed, soon to pass away. He couldn't direct his anger anywhere. Rose wasn't to blame, and she still thinks of Luca as her real father. His ex-wife passed away without revealing anything about the other man involved. Luca was left with unresolved anger. He couldn't treat Rose the same way as before and ended up pushing her away. For Rose, her mother suddenly disappeared, and her father became distant. It's no surprise her personality became twisted. From that point on, Rose ceased to trust anyone, viewing Luca solely as a financial resource. Since then, I've become nothing but an ATM to Rose, Luca said with a sad smile. Rose's selfishness is excessive, moreover, her disdain for others is over the top. Rose found out I wasn't her real father when she was in high school, Luca said. She didn't seem that surprised. She must have had her suspicions, he added with a sarcastic smile. I explained to Luca what I was about to do. Initially, he looked reluctant. His expression conveyed a sense of skepticism, as if questioning, is all that really necessary? I've already looked into it. If I don't do it, things could get even worse, I told him. If I don't, someone else surely will. Luca closed his eyes, deep in thought. I decided to wait quietly. After a while, Luca opened his eyes. All right, I'll leave it to you. I held Luca's hand. His hand felt bony and had become much smaller. I struggled to hold back my tears. Forcing a smile, I left the hospital room. As I stepped into the corridor, I saw Dr. Jason. I handed Dr. Jason a scientific magazine showcasing the latest medical technologies. Please help my husband, I said to him and left the hospital. Now, it's just a matter of taking action. To psych myself up, I slapped both of my cheeks sharply with my hands. This always helps me focus. After spending a night at a hotel, I checked my cell phone for messages and returned home before noon the next day. I could hear the sound of the TV and Rose's laughter coming from the living room. In the living room, Rose was watching TV and laughing heartily. It was a rare sight, she's usually in a foul mood, but today she seemed happy. Looking around, I noticed several things were missing. I spoke to myself, prompting a reaction from Rose. Oh, I threw them out. Your stuff, shocked, I entered the bedroom. The room was empty. No computer, no TV, no stereo. Even the bed and furniture were gone. The closet was empty too. I returned to the living room and confronted Rose. What's the meaning of this? Rose looked at me with disdain while lying on the sofa. They were needless, so I disposed of them. I put my hands on my hips, visibly angry. Needless? What are you going to do? When I raised my voice, Rose made a face of disgust. She averted her gaze from me and sighed dramatically. I'm tired of living with you, Rose had said something outrageous. What does she think this place is? What do you mean by that? This home belongs to Luca and me. When I retorted sharply, Rose's face turned sour. Stop leeching off Dad, leeching. What could she possibly mean by that? Rose suddenly brought up something unexpected. Come to think of it, she had mentioned our money before. Could Rose be under some grand misunderstanding? As I stood there unable to respond, Rose's irritation grew. Do I have to spell it out for you? I'm saying stop depending on Dad's money. Rose and I never got along well, but I had always tried to be considerate towards her. I've complied with all of Rose's requests, even those that felt like harassment. Even if it was harassment, I wanted to get along with Rose. As the second wife, I've always strived to be kind and loving. Feeling somewhat guilty, yet I received such treatment in return. I wasn't leeching off anyone. I was just trying to do everything for Rose. I wanted to convey this to Rose, yet the words eluded me. While I struggled to speak, Rose added insult to injury. Dad's not coming back anyway, so there's no reason for you to be here, she said. That's not true, I interjected, but Rose raised her voice. Shut up. I don't want to hear your excuses. Hearing Rose's hysterical voice, I made up my mind. It's no use, I realized. I gave up in my heart. My feelings for Rose did not reach her. The emotional bond one was attempting to forge with Rose had been severed. I felt my feelings for Rose fading. Just a moment ago, I thought of us as family, but now we're complete strangers. From the beginning, it was clear Rose was only using me for her own convenience. That's why she could so boldly drive me away. Rose needs to reflect on her actions. She must face the consequences of her actions, and I will tell her the truth. I resolved to confront Rose with the truth. Determined, I locked eyes with Rose. Rose looked back at me with fearful eyes. What, got a problem? She asked. No, I'll leave, just as you wish. I checked other rooms, the bathroom and the toilet. Don't bother looking. Everything's gone, Rose said. I had it picked up by a collection service. I picked up a flyer from the living room. That's the place, I said. The flyer was just there, conveniently. This was something I had left in the living room. I almost let out a laugh at Rose's shallowness. Forcing a stern face, I glared at Rose. I hope you come to realize the gravity of your actions, I said, with those parting words. I immediately left the house. As soon as I stepped out of the apartment, I contacted the waste collection service that had emailed me in the morning. The collection service had kept my belongings in storage. Not only did they store them, but they also moved them into the storage unit I had rented. I thanked them politely over the phone before hanging up. I intentionally left that flyer on the living room table. I thought Rose might just do something like that given her personality. Seeking out a collection agency would have likely been too bothersome for her. Therefore, I surmised that if a flyer for a junk removal service was readily available on the table, she might be inclined to call the listed number. I was willing to forgive her if she didn't go that far, but Rose went through with it. My patience finally ran out. I went to the hospital to see Luca in the hospital room. It seemed Luca was getting some explanation from Dr. Jason. When I entered the room, Dr. Jason left the bed and walked away. Luca's face was unusually happy. It was a shame I had to bring up such a topic when he was in a good mood. Reluctant as I was, I shared the earlier incident with Luca. His face immediately clouded over, but it can't be helped, right? I gently held Luca's thin hand. Thank you for understanding. In fact, I had already decided where I was moving to. Anticipating this situation, I had prepared a new place. Even if I wasn't kicked out, there was a chance I would leave on my own. Either way, I needed a new place. I planned to move and start a new life with a fresh mindset. It's just that things are happening a bit sooner than planned. Luca smiled gently. I was comforted by Luca's smile. To be honest, being kicked out by Rose didn't really put me in a bind. It just moved my plans up by a couple of weeks. But now I'd have to live in a hotel for 2 weeks. Maybe it's my frugality that makes me think it's a waste. Regardless, I resolved in my heart to be prepared for whatever Rose might do next. I started taking the actions I had prepared for in advance. Once the move was successfully completed and I had settled down, Rose called me. As soon as I answered, Rose's loud voice filled my ear. "You took our money, didn't you?" I played dumb and asked, "Huh? What are you talking about?" My feigned ignorance seemed to infuriate Rose further. "Don't play dumb. It's about Dad's hospital bills. The hospital just called saying they need to be paid. I was expecting this call around now." "Oh, that," I replied in a deliberately relaxed tone. I purposely hesitated and sighed. "You should pay it. It's not my concern anymore. You have the living expenses that Dad transferred, right? Just pay it out of that." "That's true, but I don't have the bank book or ATM card for that account." Desperate, Rose confronted me. The more heated Rose became, the more calmly I behaved. "I didn't take it," I said with a composed face. "Don't lie. Who else could have used it?" I struggled to suppress my laughter. Ever since Luca's salary significantly decreased, there has hardly been any money in that account. A simple bank statement update would reveal this, but Rose probably hadn't done that. There was just very little money to begin with. Even with this explanation, Rose wasn't satisfied. "If you can't pay the hospital bills, you should just use your own salary." Rose remained silent. Given Rose's spendthrift nature, it's unlikely she has any savings. She tends to spend her salary as soon as she gets it. I know how much Rose earns. Luca had previously informed me about her earnings. Moreover, Luca even used to give Rose an allowance. "You're old enough to have some savings, aren't you?" I could almost hear Rose grinding her teeth. After a long silence, so long I thought the call had dropped, Rose suddenly raised her voice. "What's wrong with me spending the money I earned?" Rose continued to rant. "You're the one who spent all the money Dad gave us, aren't you?" I could hear Rose's heavy breathing. The farce was over. I got to the heart of the matter. "If it's not savings, then use the money you acquired dishonestly." I heard a thud. It seems Rose dropped her cell phone, probably too shocked to keep a grip on it. "How did you know about that?" Rose didn't deny it, she had just admitted to the wrongdoing. There was no escaping it now. I told Rose we would discuss the details when we met and hung up. I had sent the meeting place via email. I also attached the audio file of Rose saying, "How did you know about that?" to the email. I had recorded the conversation with Rose. It's always wise to have evidence on hand. Anyway, I had arranged a meeting with Rose. All that was left was to present my evidence. The next day, Rose showed up at the agreed meeting place. It was the entrance to the apartment building where I live. I called out to Rose. Rose looked up, surprised. "Here, yes. I sent you the address, didn't I?" Rose craned her neck to look up. "You live in this tower." Rose was looking at the tallest apartment in the area, not only the tallest but also the most spacious and expensive. An Italian sports car was even parked at the entrance. "This place is worth over $1 million, isn't it?" Rose muttered. I led the astonished Rose to my apartment. My apartment is close to the top floor. Even with the high-speed elevator, it takes a while to reach the top. During the ride, Rose was nervously biting her nails and trembling. Clearly, she was overwhelmed with anxiety, probably sensing something bad was about to happen. Upon arriving, I unlocked the door with my cell phone. Nowadays, cell phones can also serve as keys. Rose looked at me with a surprised expression. I entered the room without minding her reaction. The living room offers a panoramic view of the outside. The apartment we used to live in looks tiny from up here. The living room is spacious with a generous layout, and the kitchen is large. I had Rose sit on the sofa in the living room. Seemingly tense, Rose was clutching her bag tightly. I made some coffee and handed it to her. Rose took the cup with a rattling sound. She was desperately trying not to drop it. It's too spacious, it's unsettling, I said mockingly, smiling at Rose. Rose remained silent. I've been preparing to live here for a while, I said. Rose must have thought of me as a parasite living off Luca. No wonder she was shocked. Shall we start the discussion, then? This is Tyler, my lawyer. I introduced Tyler, who was waiting in the back, to Rose. Rose seemed too overwhelmed to even notice Tyler. Her gaze was unsettled, darting around nervously. Ignoring Rose's state, Tyler began laying out documents on the table. Rose barely responded to my attempts to engage her in conversation. Distracted by the room, she kept looking around. Just when I thought we couldn't have a proper discussion, Rose mumbled, "How could you afford such a penthouse?" Figuring she was curious, I answered, "Rose, I just bought it the regular way." "Don't lie. How could you afford it?" "I had the income to afford it as my family's small restaurant began to recover. I not only advised but also got actively involved in its management. The business flourished in an exciting way. I quit my corporate job as I got busier." Rose likely assumed I had become merely a housewife after leaving my job. "We turned the small restaurant into a corporation, and I became an executive. The business was doing well, expanding into multiple outlets like a specialty grilled chicken restaurant and a fine dining place. That's why I could easily afford this penthouse apartment." I explained that I didn't earn that much. I shared the story of my family's business. Rose only knew that Luca had helped when my family's restaurant was struggling. I then told her how my family's business eventually came to support Luca's company and that I had become an executive. Hearing my story, Rose slumped in defeat. I wondered if Rose was feeling regret, but she suddenly looked up and said something unexpected. "All right, I'll live here too. Let's make up." What is she talking about? That's what I thought, but I just silently stared at Rose. There's enough space here for my room too, right? I glared at Rose with a cold look. Save your dreaming for when you're actually asleep. She was completely unfazed by my sarcasm. "I'm serious," she said. That's when Tyler cleared his throat. He probably couldn't bear to go along with Rose's absurd statements any longer. Tyler handed Rose a bill. Looking at the bill, Rose's face turned pale, her hands trembled and sweat formed on her forehead. "This is a fraudulent bill." "It's a phantom charge," Tyler stated. After graduating from college, Rose had worked at Luca's company. However, she conspired with a client company to make unjust charges to the company. The illicit gains were shared with the accomplice from the client company. To set Rose up, I had hired a detective agent and conducted a thorough investigation using whatever I could. Then, an individual from the client company who conspired with Rose leaked information to Tyler. I immediately consulted with my in-laws, who had stepped down from the presidency to become chairpersons, about the matter. My in-laws were furious and promised to administer an appropriate punishment. Embezzlement on the job. Quite the crime indeed, Tyler took in my words. If convicted of fraud, you could face up to 10 years in prison, not to mention civil damages. Wait a minute, there must be some mistake. Rose desperately tried to deny it. However, the evidence was complete, and the accomplice had confessed. "Admit it. The charges against you are only getting heavier, just as I thought." Rose was gripping the bill tightly enough to tear it. She suddenly stood up. "I'm sorry," Rose apologized. "Sorry doesn't cut it," I spoke in a flat, emotionless voice, "especially since you've done it habitually. It's deemed extremely malicious." Rose collapsed to the floor and began to apologize. "I'm truly sorry. Please forgive me." "No chance." With my cold response, Rose's face became a mess of tears. Her usually impeccable makeup was completely ruined. If things continue this way, losing your job will be the least of your worries. You might even get arrested. It was all Rose's own doing. Your apologies won't earn you forgiveness. Rose's tears and runny nose left dark stains on the carpet. Please forgive me, just staying silent about it is enough. I turned my back on Rose, who kept apologizing. This isn't just between you and me. Rose seemed unable to let go. She made an outrageous offer to me. Then I'll give you money. I'll charge the company again and give you that money. I sighed deeply and pressed my hand to my forehead. Nothing I said would make a difference now. Rose had no intention of repenting, she was solely focused on navigating her way out of the predicament. There's no helping you. You need to be properly judged, I said, revealing the voice recorder in my hand to Rose. Rose seemed to realize she had made an outrageous proposal. She trembled, covering her mouth with her hand. I'll submit this as evidence to the police, I declared. Rose kept her head down. It was as if something had been drained from her. Tyler and I then escorted Rose out of the room. Leaning against the wall, she staggered toward the elevator. Once Tyler had departed, I collapsed into the depths of the sofa, exhausted. It was finally over. I reported the outcome to Luca via email as planned. Rose was criminally charged by the company. She was arrested, and the employee from the partner company was indicted. While on bail, Rose had been dating this employee. Whether Rose really had romantic feelings is unclear. It's highly possible she pretended to like him just to use him. Rose is now detained in a holding cell awaiting trial. She also faces a lawsuit for damages from the company. Rose was disliked at the company, and perhaps it was a form of retribution. Being the president's daughter, she was exceedingly unpopular among the employees. She also had a haughty attitude toward clients, which negatively impacted performance. Not only was her attitude presumptuous, but Rose also made many mistakes. There were numerous complaints, but no one dared to criticize her because she was the president's daughter. This is what I heard from Luca. Luca is still hospitalized, focusing on his treatment. Luca entrusted the presidency to Michael, his reliable executive vice president. This decision had been made quite a while ago. With Rose gone, the transition proceeded smoothly. Luca is fighting his illness despite the challenges in obtaining a discharge. A pioneering treatment available in Germany offered new hope, holding the promise of published scientific journal. Dr. Jason and I had many discussions. Dr. Jason understood and agreed, and Luca will soon go to Germany for treatment. Of course, it's private healthcare not covered by insurance. I'm not worried about the treatment costs. If necessary, I can just sell the penthouse. Luca will surely recover, and he will surely smile at me with that gentle smile again. I can hardly wait for that day.